Good evening, I'm David Kramer with Alaska Weather. As always, please visit our website, weather.gov/Alaska, get updates to the forecast, or check out any watches, warnings, or advisories that we might have out for your area. You can also call our weather info line, 1-800-472-0391, get updates to the forecast for that means as well, and email me at the address at the bottom of the screen, david.kramer@noaa.gov with any questions or concerns. Taking a look now, we'll start with a look at our warnings and advisories that we have out for the state. Down in southeast Alaska, we have two winter weather advisories out. Both of these are for snow for Juneau and Gustavus, and these are going to be in effect from 1 a.m. till 10 a.m. on Tuesday. Again, that's winter weather advisories for snow, expecting 3 to 5 inches of new snow. As we move up to the west coast, we have quite a bit of activity going on. All of this is for snow and blowing snow, with all of the red areas are warnings for blizzard warnings, and we are expecting quite a bit of snowfall and winds that are going to bring the visibilities down to a quarter mile or less at times. We could see some whiteout conditions there. All along the coastline, new snowfall should stay under 4 inches. However, we'll see some isolated areas up to as high as 7 inches. But as we get further inland towards Grayling and Galena and Ambler, we do expect those areas to see more snowfall. 4 to 7 inches is expected. Some localized areas could see up to as high as 10 inches of new snow. Winds are going to be strongest along the west coast. We're going to see pretty regularly winds in the 40-mile-per-hour range along much of the coastline. However, as we get farther to the west, those winds are going to increase. In some areas, we'll see winds in the 60s. So combined, we do have that new snowfall. And with those strong winds, we are going to see a lot of blowing snow conditions. Again, we have blizzard warnings all the way from the Kuskokwim Delta area up the coastline through the Chukchi Seacoast, including Kotzebue Sound. We have the winter weather advisories for snow and blowing snow as well. And then the winter storm watches for those blowing snow conditions as we get further into the western interior locations. For any additional details on the specifics for your area, please visit our website, weather.gov/Alaska, and check out exactly what the warnings say for your area. Taking a look at the satellite imagery, we'll start off west with the system that's going to be bringing those blizzard conditions to the west coast. You can already see some of the cloud cover moving in over the Shemya area. A little bit warmer down there by the Aleutians, however. Some of the colder air is going to be out farther to the north in the Bering Sea. As we look down south of the Alaska Peninsula, we can see another low pressure system pushing in towards the Gulf of Alaska area, already stretching cloud cover out through all of the Gulf of Alaska area. Up in the interior portions of the state, we can see some lingering cloud cover that's resulting in some lingering snow out for much of the central and western portion of mainland Alaska. Finally, out over the Panhandle area, not seeing a lot of higher level clouds coming in, but starting to see the cloud cover from that system moving into the Gulf as we move to the later hours of this run. Looking out at the weather for the remainder of the day, we'll once again start out west with the strong system pushing into the western Bering Sea, bringing precipitation pretty close to the western Aleutian Islands, but that ridging that's extending up from the North Pacific is holding some of that precipitation at bay right now for today. However, that ridging is starting to slide to the east, so we will see that system continuing to progress to the east as well. Underneath that high pressure, we are seeing some areas of fog over the central Aleutian Islands as well into the central Bering Sea. We do have some lingering snow out over the eastern Aleutian Islands, extending out over the Alaska Peninsula and out nearby Kodiak Island as well, as we have the system from the North Pacific headed towards the Gulf of Alaska, bringing in some warmer air with it, especially for the more eastern locations. We do have some of that rain over the eastern portions of the Gulf, extending into the southern portions of the Panhandle as well. As we move up into central and northern locations, we are going to see primarily snow in the Panhandle area. And then out over mainland Alaska, we have a weak low out over the northern coastline that's extending a trough down through the western portions of the interior, with some snow extending in from the interior locations of southwest Alaska through much of the west coast and western interior up to the western Arctic coast as well. As we look into tonight, our system out west is pushing farther to the east, bringing snow throughout much of the central Bering Sea, as well as some rain and snow mixed to the western Aleutian Islands. Ridging is now extending out over the west coast of the state, where we'll see some fog develop out over the YK Delta area as well as around Bristol Bay. Out over mainland Alaska, the snow that was out west is going to slowly push to the east, bringing some snow to the interior as well as up through the Brooks Range and down through all of south central Alaska, including Kodiak Island area. Our system that was near Kodiak is going to push a little bit farther to the north and east into more central Gulf of Alaska, bringing in continued precipitation to the Panhandle area. Overnight, it should be cold enough for most of those areas to remain as snow. As we move into Tuesday, that low is going to push farther to the east in the Gulf, bringing continued precipitation to the Panhandle areas. where we'll see some of that snowfall for those northern locations, and then more rain as we look farther to the south. Out over the central and eastern portions of the interior, we're going to see some lingering snowfall, but the big story is our system moving through the Bering Sea with that frontal system pushing in towards St. Lawrence Island, where we'll see the beginnings of those blizzard conditions early Tuesday morning, and then we'll see the blowing snow and heavier snowfall make it to the rest of the west coast by Tuesday afternoon. We are going to see those blowing snow conditions up from the Kuskokwim Delta area up to the Chukchi Sea coastline. This frontal system will push through the Pribilof Islands as well as the Aleutians, bringing some snow to the Pribilof Islands as well as some rain to the central Aleutians. Colder behind this system, we're going to expect some snow for the western Aleutians. As we move into Wednesday, we do expect that front to push more into the west coast of the state, where we'll see those blowing snow conditions spread throughout Tuesday night into Wednesday. We'll start to see those Tuesday evening for the western interior locations, with that blowing snow lasting into Wednesday. And that's going to extend down into much of southwest Alaska as well, and then up towards the northwestern portions of the state. The snow out ahead of that with some of the weaker winds is going to fall out over the interior, extending down into south central Alaska. And then behind the snowfall, we will see some rain out over the eastern Aleutian Islands, and then rain-snow mix near the central Aleutians, and finally some colder air behind this system, bringing in some snow to the western Aleutian Islands. Down in southeast Alaska, some of the precipitation will clear up, but there will still be some lingering snowfall up along any of the coastal mountains and up by the Lynn Canal area. As we move into our temperatures, we'll start off Tuesday morning for the Panhandle area. Southern locations going to drop down into the mid-30s and then mid-20s as we get farther to the north. Along the North Gulf Coast, we'll see temperatures in the mid-20s, and by Cook Inlet area in the teens, and then the Copper River Basin will drop down below zero. Up in the interior portions of the state, southeastern locations will stay above zero but in the single digits. We'll see a lot of single digits below zero for much of the rest of the interior and much of the Brooks Range. Then along the Arctic coastline, we'll see primarily temperatures dropping into the negative teens. Down the west coast of the state, primarily right around minus 10 degrees, a little bit warmer out by St. Lawrence Island, down to around minus 2 there. Down in southwest Alaska, below zero for the YK Delta, but single digits above zero for the Bristol Bay area. In the lower 20s for the Alaska Peninsula, mid to upper 20s as we get to the eastern Aleutians, and then right around 30 degrees for the central Aleutians, mid 30s for the western Aleutians. Afternoon highs for Tuesday for the Panhandle area going to get up into the lower 40s in southern locations, mid to upper 30s as we get farther to the north, mid 30s for much of the coastline for south central areas, and then near 30 as we get closer towards Cook Inlet, and in the 20s for the Copper River Basin. Up in the interior southern location is going to be in the teens, eventually getting colder as we get farther to the north, in the single digits as we get up into the Brooks Range. And then along the Arctic coastline, right around 0 degrees for those highs, right around 10 degrees along the west coast, near 30 degrees for St. Lawrence Island area, quite a bit warmer out there. Along the coastline of southwest Alaska, up in the 20s, but interior locations going to stay in the teens. Along the Alaska Peninsula area, lower 30s expected. And then for the rest of the Aleutian Islands, mid to upper 30s, with 35 for the Pribilof Islands. Wednesday morning lows down in the Panhandle area, mid-30s for southern locations, colder as we get farther to the north, mid-20s up north. Mid-20s continuing along all of the North Gulf coastline to include areas down by Kodiak Island, in the teens around Cook Inlet, and then below zero for the Copper River Basin. Up in the interior, a mix of temperatures in the single digits positive, and then as we get farther to the north, single digits negative. Up along the Arctic coastline, colder out east, dropping around down to around minus 10, but staying above zero way far out to the west. Along the west coast of the state, we'll see positive single digits to near 10 degrees. And as we drop down to southwest Alaska, in the YK Delta area, interior locations are going to be around 10 degrees, but near 20 degrees by the water. In the teens for the Bristol Bay area, near 30 degrees for the Alaska Peninsula, and mid-30s for much of the Aleutian Islands and Pribilofs. For Wednesday afternoon high temperatures, we are looking down in the Panhandle area, mid-40s expected in southern locations, and near 40 degrees for northern locations. In the 30s for much of south central Alaska, colder in the Copper River Basin. In the interior portion of the state, southern locations are going to be in the mid to upper 20s, and then near 20 degrees for those northern locations, single digits to the Brooks Range and much of the Arctic coastline until we get out west, where we will start to see some warmer temperatures getting up into the teens along that far western coastline. 20s down much of the west coast, YK Delta area near freezing, and then in the 30s for the Aleutian Islands and Pribilofs.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
I'm meteorologist Peter Chan with your aviation weather. Well, flying forecast for Tuesday morning shows an extensive area of IFR conditions across the northern Gulf of Alaska through the southeast peninsula, as well as an area extending from the Alaska Range into the western half of the Brooks Range and northwest, also out over the western and central Aleutians into the central Bering Sea, as a frontal system will be working its way eastward the next couple of days into the west side of the state. Low pressure in the southeast there will continue to create IFR conditions Tuesday afternoon across much of the southeast, whereas we'll see IFR conditions increasing there in the west from the Bering Strait all the way down into the central Aleutians. And then on Wednesday morning, IFR conditions will diminish a bit over the southeast, but expand throughout the western half of the state down into the central and eastern Aleutians. And on Wednesday afternoon, we'll continue to see areas of IFR along and south of the Brooks Range and also across much of the southwest back into the eastern Aleutians. Your past conditions on Tuesday, AKwx will start out IFR but become MVFR. Same thing at Adigan, we're looking for IFR to MVFR as the day unwinds. And further southwest, Lake Clark and Merrill will both be MVFR. In fact, just west of Merrill will be IFR, with conditions gradually improving to VFR as the day unfolds. And further north, Rainy Pass as well as Windy Passes will be IFR becoming MVFR on Tuesday. And Isabel will also be IFR becoming MVFR. Further east, Mentasta should hold at MVFR throughout the day on Tuesday, whereas Tanita will start out IFR, improving a little bit to MVFR as we go into the afternoon. And Portage, especially the west entrance, will be IFR, becoming MVFR on Tuesday. And in the southeast, Chilkoot and White will be socked in with IFR conditions throughout the day. Well, looking at the freezing levels, we have the surface, the freezing levels are at the surface, the inner southeast coast up along the Kenai Peninsula and Kodiak Island, and then extending down into the eastern Aleutians and back out over the central Bering. I notice there'll be a little elevation in freezing levels of 2, 4, and 6,000 feet over the Gulf, as well as across the central Aleutians out ahead of that frontal system there. Best chance for icing will be in the southeast along the coastal Gulf waters above 2,000 feet and the inner waterways above 4,000 feet. Another area of enhanced icing potentially there around St. Lawrence Island and the west central areas above 1,000 feet. Taking a look at upper level jet stream winds at 30,000 feet, there is a nearly 200 knot jet max out over the western central Aleutians into the central Bering Sea from the west and northwest. Those strong winds come on shore into western Alaska, rapidly ramping up above 100 knots as those winds will continue to progress eastward. The interior Alaska, generally 60 to 80 knot winds, and in the southeast there is higher level winds there across the southern half of the southeast peninsula, upwards of over 100 knots. Taking a look at 9,000 foot winds in the southeast, winds up around 70 knots are coming inland there, especially just north of Haida-Gwaii. And then further west, we see a band of 55 knot winds coming on shore across the western portions of the state, and also winds around 80 knot, 9,000 foot wind backs there from the west across the central Aleutians into the central Bering. And taking a look at 3,000 foot winds there and a low pressure circulation just east of Yakutat on Tuesday, with winds out of the west around 50 knots at Haida-Gwaii. And then along the west coast, we are looking for winds of anywhere from 50 to 70 knots moving on shore, extending all the way down into the eastern Aleutians. Best chance of turbulence will generally be below 6,000 feet across the southeast on Tuesday. Pockets of turbulence below 4,000 feet in the northwest, and then areas below 4,000 feet extending along the Alaska Peninsula and below 3,000 feet out over the central and eastern Aleutians. So that wraps up our aviation weather segment, and safe travels.
Just as the sun is part of weather on Earth, it also affects weather in space. The sun creates solar wind by steadily releasing a flow of plasma particles in all directions around it. Sometimes the sun gives off a flash of light and X-rays. This is known as a solar flare. When massive bursts of particles explode into space, we call it a coronal mass ejection, or CME. When a CME is directed toward Earth, it hits the magnetosphere, the magnetic field around our planet that protects us. If the storm is large, we may even get to enjoy a light display in the sky called the auroras. In space, satellites may be damaged, and astronauts should take cover. On Earth, people do not feel any physical effects. We may lose electricity in some areas, polar flights may be rerouted, and satellite services may be disrupted. While these situations aren't ideal, they are rare and fixable. This is why we will continue to study the sun and its interactions with Earth and the solar system.
Longing for more space, open skies, and exotic travel? Then look up, about 30 to 600 miles straight up, at the ionosphere, Earth's interface to space. Nestled far above the clouds but below outer space, this little understood destination invites you to explore its many features. Experience both the weather from Earth and the weather from space. Marvel at the ballet of radio waves and navigation signals, like GPS, leaping through this particled paradise. Sit back, relax, and take in the aurora, some satellites, and the International Space Station as they sail by. And you'll want your camera handy for one of the region's signature features, bright and colorful air glow. This daily show is made possible by the ionosphere's own swarming charged particles, because that's what the ionosphere is. It's all charged particles. During the day, enjoy the sea of particles, freshly energized by the sun. As the sun sets, this particle party relaxes and the air glow thins. Our quieter nightlife lets you gaze into clearer skies. The ionosphere is in constant motion, an amazing effect of space weather. Don't miss when solar storms rain down. The storm separates the particles even more, making this colorful region delightfully more dense in some places and stunningly sparse in others. And don't forget about storms from Earth below. Your weather from back home also stirs up this one-of-a-kind destination. Experience the unique beauty of every season, as changes in Earth's atmosphere, daily and annually, can create pressure waves, changing the ionosphere's shape and density. Venture to the equator, where our particles are packed in lush and thick. Cruise along a magnetic field line and see how the ionosphere's charged material also interacts with Earth's own magnetic field. Don't miss the superhighway of particles zipping out to space and back down to the planet. This unpredictable parade of charged particles can help you unplug and unwind. This is because the crowd of particles can garble the radio and satellite communications from home. The ionosphere welcomes you to discover more about this little-known region. After all, once you've explored this interface to space, who knows how much farther you'll be able to go.
When a star, bigger and more massive than the Sun, runs out of fuel at the end of its life, its core collapses while the outer layers are blown off in a supernova explosion. What's left behind depends on the star's original mass. A star roughly 10 to 20 times our Sun leaves behind a neutron star. A more massive star becomes a black hole. Unlike black holes, neutron stars are directly observable, usually as pulsars, the lighthouses of the cosmos. Discovered 50 years ago, they are the densest observable objects in the universe. Neutron stars compress up to twice the sun's mass into a city-sized sphere. Matter is packed so tightly that a teaspoon of neutron star interior would weigh more than 1 billion tons on Earth. Still, the nature of the ultra-dense matter in the cores of neutron stars is unknown. Because neutron stars pack so much mass into such a tiny volume, they produce gravity strong enough to bend the light they emit, distorting their appearance in a way that enables the mass and size of the star to be measured. Scientists cannot reproduce the extreme conditions in and around neutron stars on Earth. They must look into the galaxy to answer decades-old questions about extreme matter and gravity. NASA's Neutron Star Interior Composition Explorer mission, or NISA, will make X-ray observations of neutron stars from its perch on the International Space Station. It will give astronomers more insight into these mysterious objects, helping determine what is under their surface. A multi-purpose mission, NISA includes a technology demonstration called Sextant. It will analyze NISA's observations to validate the use of rapidly rotating neutron stars as navigation beacons for travel in deep space throughout the solar system and beyond.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back to our marine weather segment of the show. Today's sea ice edge extends down through the central Bering and along the southwest coast, and we are going to see the ice edge retreat northward each day for the next couple of days, about 20 to 30 nautical miles northward as we develop some stronger winds with a southerly component to them ahead of a frontal system that'll be working into the west side of the state here later Tuesday and Wednesday. So, looking at the marine forecast for the southeast peninsula, winds in the inner waterway and the south end there will be out of the south-southeast 20 to 25 knots, waves about 4 to 6 feet from Petersburg to Ketchikan. Southwesterly 25 to 30 knots, waves around 10 feet offshore. And areas from around just north of Sitka to Gustavus and Yakutat, easterly at 30 knots, waves about 10 feet. Going through the day on Wednesday, we're going to see westerly and northerly components return to the wind, inner waterways, northwesterly about 10 to 15 knots, waves running 2 to 3 feet. Along the coast, northwest 30 knots, waves 12 to 13 feet, Craig to Sitka. And more out of the west, 20 to 25 knots and waves around 10 feet, Yakutat to Gustavus. Prince William Sound for the south central areas on Tuesday, we'll see northwest winds 20 knots, 3-footers offshore of the Kenai, and the mouth of Cook Inlet 25 to 30 knots, waves 6 to 9 feet. South central areas on Wednesday, we'll see winds trying to develop more of a west to southwest component as we get through there. Still northwesterly at Prince William Sound, waves running a couple feet there, but as we get off of the Kenai, especially between Kodiak Island and the mouth of Cook Inlet, winds will be out of the southwest 20 to 25 knots, waves from 5 to 9 feet. And going out to the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island, winds around Kodiak Island will be northwest to north 25 knots, waves offshore generally about 10 feet, but on the Pacific side, look for west winds 15 to 20 knots, waves 3 to 8 feet. On Wednesday, as that frontal system begins to approach and work its way across the region, southwest to west winds 25 knots on the Pacific and Gulf side, waves 9 to 10 feet. On the Bering side, we're looking for waves to range from 6 feet Port Heiden upwards to 14 feet just north of Cold Bay. Across the Aleutian chain on Tuesday, winds will be generally out of the southwest at around 30 to 40 knots, and waves on the Pacific side, at least in the eastern Aleutians, will be running about 7 to 10 feet, 7 to 14 feet on the Bering side. But once you get west of Adak, waves will be building from 15 to over 20 feet west of Kiska. And then on Wednesday, winds develop more of a westerly component. Southwest to west winds around 30 knots on the Pacific side, waves 11 to 17 feet. And on the Bering side, waves generally running about 12 to 16 feet. And heading up to the west coast, we have over the open waters, south winds 40 to 45 knots, waves ranging from around 12 feet in the vicinity of St. George to 21 feet south of the St. Matthew. Out over the ice, Blizzard conditions on the ice pack with blowing snow, also blizzard conditions along the west coast with south winds of 30 to 40 knots. And on Wednesday, look for generally southwesterly winds around 25 knots over the ice pack. Still some blowing snow continuing into the afternoon. Open waters 15 to 25 knots, waves 13 to 16 feet from St. Paul and St. George northward to the open waters south of St. Matthew. And then finally, as we go to the Arctic coast, winds will be out of the west to southwest at 15 knots. And going south of Point Lay, winds will generally be out of the south, picking up to 30 to 40 knots with blowing and drifting snow and blizzard conditions along areas of the coast. Going into Wednesday, along the Arctic coast, winds are east to southeast around 15 knots. Still brisk, though, upwards to around 30 knots from Cape Lisburn south through Kotzebue Sound and to west of Nome, where there'll still be that potential for some blowing and drifting snow. And then finally, taking a look at the synoptic maps here, the low pressure out over the Gulf of Alaska will be moving up toward Yakutat here as we head into Tuesday. And then the occluded front out there in the Bering will continue eastward and move into the west coast later on Tuesday, producing blizzard conditions, that is falling snow and blowing snow along the west coast. That'll be moving inland during the day on Wednesday, with more widespread snow and some blowing and drifting snow continuing along the west coast.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.